Hello everybody, how you doing today? I wanted to shoot a quick video and talk a little bit about what I'm looking for in the midterm. First thing, when you look at the midterm, you go, wow, this looks easy. All I've got to do is go out there and pick out some parts. But if you give it a little thought, if you actually had those parts start showing up at your house and you had to assemble a PC from them, then suddenly hey, I need a power supply, or hey, I need a hard drive becomes more an issue of, wow, did I order something that my motherboard supports? Do I actually have the type of plug for this technology where I can put it together? So that's some of the things I wanted to talk about. One of the things that really bothers me is I hear people joking a lot of time about customer service being outsourced, but you never really hear people talking about how many of us call up a vendor and say, yeah, I need a whatchamacallit and I need a thingamabob? Well, if you get the wrong thing at that point, whose fault is it really? You're asking for something and you're not even properly identifying the object. So that's one of the things this is about, is learning to properly identify a part that you're asking for, but also to make sure that you're asking for the part you truly need. And if you look at the computer, one of the things that immediately comes to my mind is this. You know, if I went into a kindergarten classroom, I would see kids sitting there with this puzzle for shapes. And when you look at this puzzle for shapes, you say, well, why does that matter to me? Well, it's really the same problem. If you order a serial ATA hard drive and all you've got is IDE ports on the motherboard, and yes, I realize that I'm talking about technology that may be 1, 2, 3, 4 years dated, but in the real world, everybody doesn't buy the latest and greatest technology just because it came out. If somebody has a computer that satisfies their needs and they want to repair it, they're probably not as likely as an IT student, an IT professional, an IT professor to go out and buy a new computer versus trying to repair what they have. Another point that your book does a good job of really getting around to and explaining is a lot of the troubleshooting repair on PCs are very, very intuitive. If you start getting warning messages on the screen telling you there's a problem with the hard drive, then you probably have a problem with the hard drive. If your video goes out, you start to think maybe there's something going on in the video subsystem here I need to look at. If you got smoke boiling out of the power supply, it's probably not a keyboard problem. And I'm oversimplifying this. I know there's a lot of technical aspects to it, but that's one of the things I want you to consider. Another thing I want you to look at is, you see, I also have a jug of milk, a gallon jug of milk that's got roughly half a gallon of milk in it. This is another scenario. We would never go out and get a half-gallon jug and try to pour a gallon of milk into it. Putting a half-gallon into a gallon jug works fine. Pouring a gallon into a half-gallon jug, a lot messier proposition to have to deal with and clean up after. This is also one of the things that we encounter when we start looking at processors and we have to consider the front side bus speed. Is it okay to put a slower processor on a faster front side bus? Is it okay to put a faster processor on a slower bus? Which way does this go? Because one way, you're sitting there looking at the analogy of a half gallon of milk in a gallon jug, but the other way, you're quite literally trying to put a gallon into a half gallon container. So these are the kind of things that I want you to think about, and I'm in no way implying that any of you are children or that any of you need to do this shape test, but what I am saying is these are two examples that it really wouldn't hurt for you to reflect on and go, you know what? Did I mess up the shape test? Do I have the right piece of equipment here? Do I have the right type of connector? Am I trying to put a gallon in a half-gallon container? Make sure that you're not creating those kind of problems when you build a PC. Another thing is, when you look at the sheet that I have out there, I put this one in D2L and it's listed as thoughts on compatibility. And you see that when I come up here and look at a case, does the form factor match the motherboard? Well, just as an example, if you get a micro ATX case and try to put a full-size ATX motherboard in it, guess what? You're putting a gallon and a half-gallon container. Does the case have enough drive bays? Well, some of these smaller cases may only have one drive bay or two drive bays, and you're planning something more extensive. That could be a really important thing to consider. You see some other options up there. You get down to motherboard. Does the motherboard match the case form factor? What CPU socket slot grid is present? Okay, I would read through this list, and on every component that you go through, you need to be able to answer the question, what has led me to believe that there is a place for this to fit in the case, that I have the proper power to supply it with, my operating system supports it, and I have the correct connector to plug it into the motherboard. Okay, now I see a lot of people design really good computers and they leave the whole compatibility column blank. That's really a shame. If you do not fill out the compatibility column, I will give you a 0 for the midterm project. I'm not trying to be unkind. It's one of the main things that I'm trying to point out here. If you don't establish compatibility, then I have no way of knowing that you addressed that compatibility issue and that you were successful. So I would go through this sheet. I would go through looking out there on PriceWatch. PriceWatch is another thing that we talk about. There's a reason I use PriceWatch. PriceWatch doesn't really sell you anything. It's more of a search engine for parts. I'm doing that so you are just, I'm not promoting anybody. You're just going out there and finding parts to use for this project. So with that said, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, send me a message, and by all means, have fun when you go through this project. This is a really cool project. It should be really fun. Take care.